Welcome for another session that we're recording today, which is called Innovationsweisen. We're going to have it in English because of a special guest that we have. A very warm welcome to you, Dries from the WHU. I'm happy to have you here.
Thank you.
And of course, we have with us also Manfred. Today is going to be a session between Dries and Manfred. Hi, Manfred.
Hi.
So, just as a quick framing, how this all came up, Dries, you reached out to us saying that you've been listening to our podcast over Christmas that we released, where we were talking about Money's book. The podcast and also the book was evolving around the whole topic of trust and how to build substantial partnerships between companies, and smaller companies to work together to come up with innovation, to tackle new challenges, go into new markets, and how you need to build the setting for having these partnerships being successful. And today we just want to kind of bring two perspectives together, the academic perspective, which you, Dries, have been looking at heavily, and also the, let's say, applied perspective, Manfred, that you probably have a pretty good view on. So for the beginning, I would like to have both of you introduce their perspective on partnerships and trust and what you have been working on in the past. As a guest, I would say I give the word first to Dries, and I would be very happy to hear your opinions about how partnerships can be set up, and just also like more detail what you have been working on lately.
Yeah, thanks. So actually, my research on partnerships goes back to my PhD, which I did at the University of Leuven in Belgium, which I finished in 2006, so it's quite some time ago. And so actually my PhD thesis was called Collaboration for Innovation. And so what I did was actually a bunch of case studies where I actually studied in depth a number of R&D partnerships, strategic alliances between large companies and small companies. And so the purpose was just to find out what kind of challenges do normally emerge when partners want to jointly innovate and how can they address them. And to be honest, out of that research, what clearly emerged was this topic of trust also. And so in all interviews, but in the studies, this notion of trust was a very fundamental notion that emerged in the cases, which actually forced me to also really delve into the kind of fundamental research about trust in the academic literature. What does it exactly mean? How can you foster it? So that means that actually by accident, I became a bit of an expert in this notion of trust. But at the same time, to be honest, I also noticed when I talked with people in the alliances that trust is important, it's necessary, but it's definitely not sufficient to have a good collaboration. And so I think that might be something that we can talk a bit more in depth about later on.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I would give the word quickly to Mani, because you just also said while doing your research, you were thinking of what does trust actually mean? And I think, Manfred, you have a pretty good perspective on that.
Well, basically, yeah. Just to give a little bit bigger picture on that, I came to the matter of trust, and I called the book about trust, Vertrauen, because I think it's when you focus on partnerships to create something new. Actually, when you're not when you have a lot of uncertainty around you, yeah, there is one thing you got to be sure of, and that is that you can basically trust that the people around you are motivated by the same thing. And I think that's a very important fact, that you got to trust on something. And I think there is a lot of discussion about, do you trust people, or do you trust another entity, or do you trust that everybody is looking for the same thing, or is looking in the same direction? And for me, basically, I'm always talking about this second trust. Yeah, so you're trusting in the structure, you're trusting the same motivation, you're trusting the system that you've created to be that everybody involved is motivated on the same thing. And I think that's also so very important when you, as Dries just said, that trust is an important thing, but what is it you're actually trusting on? Is it that there are just noble people around you and nobody will basically screw you, or do you trust in that you've created or participate in a system that is actually designed very good? And this is the kind of trust I'm thinking about all the time.
So I would hand that over to Dries right away. Do you see a difference also from an academic perspective between trust that you have in the people, where we always speak like I trust this person that he's going to tell me the truth, and trust in the whole system that you kind of create the perfect infrastructure, the perfect setting where everyone can benefit from? Do you see a difference between these two aspects also in the academic world?
Yes, definitely. And actually, that's sometimes a bit the annoying thing of the academic world, that we make way too many distinctions. So I can tell you there are a lot of academic conferences where we discuss for one day long on the definition of trust, but these are not often the most productive conferences. But still, for instance, in the academic literature, a core distinction is between goodwill trust and competence trust. So goodwill trust is about, do I trust in your intentions? So do I trust that you will not screw me over? Whereas competence trust is about, do I trust that you actually have the competencies to do what you promised to do? And so it might be that I can have a lot of trust in your competencies, but not in your intentions, or the other way around. And actually, research shows that actually competence trust might be more important than goodwill trust, because to some extent, goodwill trust I can cover with contracts and that kind of stuff.
Absolutely, and sorry to interrupt you, but that goodwill trust is something that, in the end, I think you can manage that. Yeah, and that's when you say you're designing a system, an ecosystem, or whatever, you can basically say, okay, how does one benefit from the collaboration? Yeah, and if you're actually building up a system that where the benefits are well designed and clear and transparent, a goodwill trust can be created, because there is just no reason to screw that over.
No, I agree. That's for instance, a joint venture structure. Yeah, why would I make or destroy a joint venture? Because then I'm destroying myself, actually. So in that way, indeed.
You're both bringing up a pretty important point, which is, why would I do that? Like, why would I not work in partnerships with you? So what immediately comes to my mind is, I definitely see that trust is important, but maybe both of you can explain why it is such an issue. Like, why there is such a huge lack of trust today. That is something that I'm wondering. I would give the word to Dries first, and then Manny, you can continue.
Yeah, I think it's a very good question, because I think, and that's one of my main points nowadays, is in business schools, and so we have been guilty about that too, there is a bit a kind of assumption that people want to screw other people. If I think about competitive advantage, how people or how organizations can win over other companies, we often have a kind of implicit assumption that when I have the opportunity to screw somebody over, I will do it. And that's actually transaction cost theory of Williamson, one of the Nobel Prize winners of the past decades. That was his core assumption. And to be honest, I tend to question that assumption. I do not know if everybody has always the intention to screw the other people. Unfortunately, I think we create a lot of organizations where we actually push people to do so, but that's more against the nature of the persons than in line with the nature of the persons. So unfortunately, I think we are creating systems that push people to act in a non-trustworthy manner, which makes trust an important issue, which is a bit against, I think, the nature of most people.
Well, that reminds me of something you always say, Manny. When you meet people outside of the corporate setting, they are amazing people, and you can be very well friends with them, have amazing conversations with them. And then you meet the exact same people in a different setting, and they're completely different.
Absolutely. And I can just confirm everything that Dries just said. And I think when talking about partnerships and partnerships between organizations, basically, so joint ventures, joint innovation projects, whatever. Yeah. So the thing is, if the system where people are acting in, so the closed organization of a corporate environment, basically is built up upon dehumanizing everything, is built up on just saying it's not the person that is important, but it's the role that is important, and the capabilities and the reasons and the responsibilities of that particular role. And actually everybody is a trained monkey, and I can replace him or her then to do the job in this process environment. You basically distrust everything because it's not on a human level, and then it's just clearly impossible to trust outside this organization wall, because you have so much non-eye to eye level, so much distrust in your own organization that it's just hard to basically have a clear framing of what you actually want yourself. What does your own organization want? Because there are so many different perspectives in your own organization that it's not clear to frame what you want to have from a collaboration. And I maybe to push the discussion also in that direction, I believe that you can only build up trust in a collaboration, in a joint endeavor, if you actually know what you want yourself. When you can completely and clearly say, this is what I want to have from the collaboration, this is my expected goal, this is what I can bring in. And if you can bring in transparency on that, then you are able to build up trust. Then you are able to build up a system where everybody knows what to get and what to bring in. But if the organization you come out of is so fluffy and not straightforward itself, then it's very hard to actually build up a system that is clear and transparent, and in the end builds up trust.
Yeah, I like that you've already been explaining like a little bit of a solution perspective, what we can do in order to build this trust up. You just said like clear expectations, the clarity that every party has to have in mind of what they actually want. And well, I guess another part is also the capability to speak this expectation to the other person or to the other party. But what other factors are there? What other levers do we have in order to build up more trust? Dries, what do you see in your research?
Now, I think I started before about saying, look, trust is important, but it's not sufficient. And actually what I think is really necessary in a partnership is what we call mutual dependence. It means both partners need to see a reason why they are collaborating. And it's both partners. And I've seen a lot of cases where initially there was mutual dependence. So both partners saw, okay, the other one can deliver something that I cannot do. And that's where we have the dependence. And then there was a very successful collaboration, a lot of trust building, even friendships. But then at a certain point, the dependence disappeared. So one company learned what the other was doing and could start doing it themselves. And to be honest, irrespective of the amount of trust that was built, then this kind of partnerships collapse. The moment that one partner feels like, actually, I no longer need the other one, often then the collaboration collapsed because there was simply not this kind of necessary glue present. And I think...
Can you go a little bit into examples of these kind of happenings, Manfred, maybe?
Absolutely, and I think that's a very important fact. So collaborations change over time, and of course, if you start something new and you basically come together with different capabilities and different strengths, it's exactly that. Why should you create a joint venture, for example, if you know everything yourself and if you have every asset yourself? There's just no reason to that. You're creating a joint venture because you are in need of the asset of someone else. Yeah. So, and of course, this might happen that one party develops the skills needed themselves, if against this perspective or whatever, and then this, what I've been saying myself, that this whole system of what do we expect out of the partnership then changes, and you got to reframe that, to be honest. But the thing is, what I believe also is done with, if you have a good trust level, you can basically talk about that. So and this is something very important. So if you are in a very trustworthy relationship on this endeavor, you can basically say, okay, this has actually changed. How do we solve that? And and if you know that it happens a lot in our collaborations over time. These new ventures we create, they know everything we know. They don't need our help anymore. So why should we stick around and tell them what to do? There are people that actually live this business model. They are better in that than we are. And therefore, of course, this changes. And then you have to rearrange the partnership, which might end up in one party leaving, which might end up in different roles for the parties involved. But the thing is, do you create if you start the relationship and the partnership on a very trustworthy level, if you are capable on discussing what everybody wants and how this system of motivation is basically defined, you can actually retalk it again in the future. The worst possible collaborations are when people are starting a collaboration and then it feels hype as long as it's just if it's in the beginning and everything is a success and so on, and you basically do the partnership talk afterwards. It's just like in private relationships between people. It's funny in the beginning, but sometimes you got to do the talk. You got to find out where you actually want to end up with that.
And maybe to be a bit politically incorrect, but so it's also about staying attractive. And to be honest, I see a lot of startups or high-tech smaller companies that are quite naive about that and that do not invest in this. Like, how can I stay attractive to the other partner? And if you don't do that, they will dump you and they will go for the next attractive startup. And so I'm a bit surprised sometimes when I talk with startups that they are a bit naive about that and that they think when we have a good relationship, it will continue anyway. And that's not the case.
Basically, but I also think that you business schools are a reason for that. No, to be honest, so when I look back, so the past, I think 20 years back when I was still in school, there was the first business plan competitions and so on. So and this is kind of also a narrative that comes to my mind very often when I talk to startups, and I'm in the advisory board of some startups, and I get like pitches a few times a week, and so people are asking for investment, for advisory, for whatever. And I experience the exact same thing that you mentioned. People are focusing on exactly the business model they created once. So they're focusing on their plan. They think they need to execute that plan. Because it's the narrative. You have the business case, you're actually proving that, then you get an investment for that, then you go into scaling and so on. But what this whole thing is actually, you're not a company is not a plan. A company is an organism. An organism changes and, like you said, stays attractive for everyone else. So the improvement basically is the attractive part. But I think that's not what people get. People think the improvement is just in improving the numbers of the original case, but actually the improvement is making the mechanics better, is making the organization and this organism around it better. And this is something I really see a lot. And this is also what I think where corporate environments have a real problem, because they make a project plan, and innovation is a project plan. And a project has an end. A project has a final state. And as soon as you reach a final state, you're just boring, because everybody knows what's happening. It's like you're watching a series on Netflix. When you've seen the last episode, you know everything.
And you're not just boring, you're also not competitive, because because it's very difficult for you to adapt to changes that happen around you, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
No, and so I see the point about business schools. And for instance, I teach here at WHU, of course, developing novel business models, actually in the bachelor. And there I say in my first course, look, the purpose of this course is to fail. If you didn't fail with your business model, then something went wrong. Then you didn't test it good enough, because you need to experience failure when developing a business model. You need to experience that customer saying, yeah, but this is not what I want, or this solution doesn't make sense. And to be honest, that's a very difficult message to sell to the students in the first course. Like, here, failure is part of the game. It's something that they are still not really used to.
Well, maybe we have a little bit of potential for a discussion here, Mani. What do you think about this perspective?
Yeah, I always say there's nothing that I hate more than failure culture. I know exactly what Dries means, and I think this is also basically a language problem, to be honest, because the type of failure or failure, the word itself is defined completely different in English than it is in German. Yeah, so the German Fehlerkultur, that's just a disaster.
Yeah.
Like that's praising that you did something wrong. Yeah, so and it's kind of an excuse for something. But what actually happens, and if you're teaching your students to say failure is a good thing, you're actually telling them a wrong assumption for a test doesn't break your neck as long as you learn and make a better assumption the next time. That's what you're actually telling them. So
it's not about embracing failure. It's about dealing with failure.
Exactly, and what you're making out of it. And a few years back, I wrote a blog post, and I've called it the founder's genome, to be honest, because every time I did something wrong in one of our ventures and so on, or we did, as I said, we made a wrong assumption, and it just turned out to be like nobody wants that. It was like it drove me crazy, but it also motivated me to do it better next time. Yeah, and I think that when everybody on the great leadership conferences there, and we gotta embrace failure culture and blah blah blah, it's like giving people an excuse for not being motivated to do it better. And this is where it tends to go in the wrong direction, I think. So
you should not feel good about failure. You should feel bad about failure.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly, and you gotta basically have the strength to say, okay, I stick with the thing. Yeah, and this is where I think that are you a driver of something? Yeah, if you say, okay, this setback doesn't kill my whole agenda. Yeah, there are a lot of external factors that basically will kill you off during the time. This will just happen. Yeah, but just a negative message, a wrong test result in the end, some assumption you made but that was proven wrong, shouldn't let you stop your whole path. Yeah, and this is where I think so. Where as I said, the definition of failure is something that where we have a very very bad perspective in German, in German and in Germany. Basically, because it's just overrated. Yeah, it's a bad test result.
Now bringing this exactly this perspective back to the matter of partnerships, do you think that the same actually applies in partnerships between entities? Because when we talk about failure culture, I think oftentimes people have the failure of an individual person in mind, and that we need to be able to learn from this failure, like that this individual person has to learn from his mistake or from his failure. But what I'm thinking of right now is that probably the same applies to when you're going into a partnership between two companies, that you say, well, we go into this partnership knowing that we will probably make mistakes, like both companies will make mistakes in this partnership. Maybe we will even make a mistake setting up the partnership, but we're willing to fix this, like because we have a joint motivation. Is this also like does the same apply here as well?
Yeah, for me there is one key word here, and that's transparency. So as long in a collaboration, and especially in R&D partnerships that I studied, things go wrong because it's usually uncertain. And what I noticed that as long if you tell the other partner proactively about, okay, we did something wrong, we will fix it, or help us to fix it even, then often the partnership, it did not hurt the partnership. If you hide it And then suddenly at a kind of official board meeting, suddenly it becomes clear that you didn't reach milestones. And then you have to say, yeah, actually something went wrong. Then quickly trust will evaporate, conflicts emerge, contracts will be put on the table, and then it goes into totally the wrong direction. So I think here, transparency for me is key.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can maybe even strengthen that thing. So whenever you basically have the situation that you have an official meeting where you need to show your progress, you're not in a partnership. This is just something different. This is basically a service agreement or whatever. Yeah. So there shouldn't be the situation where one party needs to kind of report to the other party what they have done. In the end, a partnership is a situation where both parties alike are working at the same goal. Yeah. So, and there is no stream there. This one party screwed up everything. There is actually, so if it's a real partnership, there is so much involvement between the parties that this just can't happen. Yeah. So, and you need at least the acting people again. They need to be partners in crime. Yeah, so they need to stand there and tell everybody involved in this official meeting that this partnership team, this thing in the middle, basically screwed up, no matter what happened left or right. Yeah, and so in this, I think the situation actually can't happen in a real partnership. And to go back to your first question, Yannick, though, is it possible that there is failure or in partnership itself? Come on, yeah, partnerships fail all the time. Private partnerships, professional partnerships, everything's failing a lot of times. So, and I think everybody knows that you maybe once separated from another person. Yeah. So, and it doesn't mean that everything before that was total mess. Yeah. So and the same thing is with business partnerships. It can say that you for like 2 or 3 years you're actually doing great together, and then the motivations changed. And then you don't need to look at the partnership as a total failure. Yeah. You said, okay, for a certain amount of time, we actually tried this out. We did have some progress. In the end, we didn't get to the perfect result. But the time being for that, we basically learned, build up capabilities, build up knowledge of markets or whatever, or found cool people to work with.
Mm-hmm.
In the end.
Yeah, in English, there's this nice expression, no hard feelings. And I think that's a very important aspect here. I would like to bring over the discussion from one-on-one partnerships, moving more towards whole ecosystems. And I would like for Dries just to elaborate real quick what you have been working on and what kind of distinction and questions you've raised regarding partnerships in ecosystems in contrary to one-on-one partnerships.
Yeah, so in my own research, I indeed shifted a bit attention to these larger ecosystems. So then I'm referring to kind of constellations of a wide variety of partners that jointly try to deliver a new value proposition. And you see that that's becoming very important in a lot of industries, like the automotive industry, where companies like Volkswagen, Daimler, today have to actually build quite complex ecosystems to make the integrated solutions that cars are nowadays. And they have to work with partners that they have never worked for before. Today they need to work with Google, with Amazon, but also with high-tech startups. And for them, that's really a new game. And for me, the core issue is that if you want to work in an ecosystem, it requires really a different management approach. And more specifically, I think you can only successfully manage an ecosystem if you agree that the core goal should be to jointly increase your pie or your pizza or whatever you call it. It's about, we want to do something together to jointly create a bigger market.
Is that already the different management approach?
So that's indeed, yeah, that's a different management approach. Because for me, normally what we tend to do, and again, we as business schools have learned our MBA students to do that, is to try to increase my share of the pie. For a long time, that's what we learned our students to do, and that's what a lot of companies did very successfully. And I think you can make a lot of money with that. But I think if you want to play the ecosystem game, then it should be about increasing the pie and not my share of the pie.
Manfred, your view.
Yeah, exactly. But I think so. There are different perspectives on that. So I love it that Dries does the flaming on the business school, so I don't have to do that. That's very nice of you. So that's good that the guy that has never been to a business school doesn't have to do the work. So that's very good. Not to be honest. I think that's a difference between optimization in a defined market. Yeah, so that's basically what you've been talking about. What business schools or whatever, so managerial education has been telling people to do for the past decades. So if you are in your market and you have a well-defined market, you need to grow and you get yourself into a better position. So you're optimizing there. But this whole ecosystem game, you're doing that for another reason. You're doing that for approaching a new market, and nowadays most likely to approach a market that is not really well defined right now. Yeah, so the markets are changing themselves, and therefore you collaborate to address the thing. And this is why it's so different from a managing perspective. You're not optimizing something just that is already there in a well-defined environment. So you have uncertainty in the overall environment, and you're not capable of tackling that uncertainty alone. Yeah, so and this is why I like the image of the bigger pizza pie, to be honest. Yeah, because the simple question is, okay, there is a completely new market with my personal capabilities and strength. What share of the market can I basically address? Or can I even address something? Yeah, so that's the question one. And the second question is, what part of the market can I address in collaboration with someone else? And then you see, okay, the overall market share you can gain is bigger, and you still got to calculate, is this bigger than the thing you can do alone? Yeah, and only then an ecosystem makes sense. And then this question of motivation is quite easy to answer in that case. So you can say, okay, so I don't know, just give you some numbers. I can make 100 million in revenue in this market if I address it alone. If I just sell my core business to another market, I go together with someone else and we create an overall solution that is better for the customer. And in total, we can make 500 million in revenue. And this collaboration basically buys my assets in a worth of 200 million. So my deal is better. I'm still doing my core business. I'm bringing in my asset, my capabilities into this joint solution. But just by giving away the whole control and doing everything myself, I basically get the bigger picture, and I have a chance on the bigger pie.
So now you go into this partnership and into this ecosystem, and jointly you create the bigger pie. At what point do I start to try to, well, extend my share of that bigger pie again? Because, I mean, this is obviously going to happen at some point, right?
I think that's the fundamental question. Is it and to be honest, I think it's too early to make a kind of academically grounded statement here, but my assumption is, if in the end one player starts maximizing my share of the pie, plays that game, I think that in the long term, the ecosystem will collapse. So an ecosystem can only be stable in the long term if everybody continues making sure that everybody has a fair share of the pie. And that doesn't mean that everybody has the same share of the pie, but a fair share of the pie. And if one actor starts abusing the ecosystem to maximize their own share of the pie, I think it will go wrong.
And how do you negotiate the fair share of the pie?
It's not about negotiating. It's more about just having a kind of common consensus about what is a fair share. And again, I think that's also what Manfred said before. It's just about, at the beginning of the partnership, being transparent about it, talking about it with the different partners, that I think is important.
I would even go further on that. So basically for me, the thing is that you can look in different ways on this ecosystems. Yeah. So the one way to look at it is that people are the ecosystem is delivering a value to a customer in the end. And the question is it just by combining what is already there and don't change anything, or by building up something new based on the assets that are already there? And then this thing is the ecosystem itself, the business model itself, in the end, most likely the joint venture build up basically has an own value generation that is just based on the assets that were before that. And then the question doesn't really come up in the end. So what's the fair share? So the whole value generation is the ecosystem itself. Yeah. And the initiators are basically something like the suppliers or the baseline assets. And this is something I feel like this, of course, this can change throughout the time or whatever, but I don't really see the point there as long as you don't define an ecosystem just as, hey, let's meet together and tell the customer we're doing something together. Yeah. So if it's a real integration, if it's a real joint value creation, then something new in the middle happens anyway, and this is basically this is the glue of the partnership in the end. Yeah. And so therefore I don't see the point where I need to say, oh, I gotta split up everything, I don't need it anymore, or whatever. It of course can happen, but in the end you should create something in the middle that is growing so good and growing so great that you actually focus on how much more value generation can I do in the middle.
And with that, I always give the example of Place Jourdan in Brussels as a stupid example, but I think it's very clear. So it's Place Jourdan is a square in Brussels with, in the middle, you have a place where you can buy French fries. So in German, a Pommesbude. And so it attracts a lot of people because next to the Pommesbude, you have bars that allow you to eat your French fries there for free as long as you buy a beer. And so it's a very popular place in Brussels, although the scenery is actually very ugly. But so a lot of people go there to eat their French fries, go to the bar and drink a beer. Now, the moment that this Pommesbude would decide to start selling beer, the ecosystem would collapse. So they don't do that because otherwise the ecosystem will collapse. And also the bars, they don't sell food because then the ecosystem would collapse. And so there is no contract between these entities. So they have not contractually agreed not to sell beer or not to sell food, but they all realize if we start trying to maximize our share of the pie, actually the whole pie will collapse. So let's not do that.
Yeah, that's a very interesting and good comment, because also a lot of times when we talk with especially Mittelständler, they also tell us, hey, we want to do innovation, but we don't want to develop products that our clients are offering because that would just, probably destroy their current ecosystem that they are working in. And that's a pretty good perspective. Towards the end of this discussion, I would like to kind of, give an outlook, look into the future, and just ask both of your opinions of where we actually at right now in Germany regarding those kind of partnerships, regarding building up new ecosystems, because I mean, not everything is bad, right? I mean, we're also, we could always do a better job, but I wouldn't say that we're not doing anything at all. But I'm interested in your particular opinion, like where we're at right now and where is it going? Maybe we'll start with Manfred and then Dries has the last word.
I think, to be honest, we have a very painful legacy, and that's called Verbandswesen in Germany. So there are two things that kind of hinder us here to actually evolve and be better. So it's a lot of people wait for basically academia to give us the final plan, which is quite hard in academia if we're looking at economics, because economics as academia needs to look at what's happening in the market and needs to structure that and then makes a method out of that. Yeah, so that's kind of research works there, and that's good. Yeah, but if everybody is waiting for academia to tell you what to do, then of course this just takes time. And the second thing, as I said, as a legacy of Verbandswesen is that we have a great tradition of meeting and do nothing. Yeah, so and still have the feeling, yeah, we met, we talked about it. Yeah, but it's this thing. So who actually starts? Who's taking the risk of doing something, and who is actually working on aligning interests? And I think that's on the one hand, that's hard to manage legacy, but on the other hand, what I see, and this is basically also pushed to COVID, to be honest, is that a lot of companies understood that the speed they need right now to actually change something is tremendous, and they don't get it done themselves. Yeah, so they need someone else, and they are looking at new partnership models that are more than just empty words or something. Yeah, so in this in German you would say this was a Schuss vor den Bug, the pandemic, for them to tell them, okay, if you really wanna be fast, if you really need to build something up, you need to partner. And I think that one last step is that, or last word for me is that it's more than this hype topic of corporate startup collaboration. Yeah, it's not just about the big entity partnering with the small entity. That is a part of it, but much more it's independent of the size, working together with others on an eye-to-eye level. And it doesn't matter if there's two big partners, one big, one small, two small, three big, whatever. It's creating environments where we're actually eye to eye. And I see positive tendencies in the past few months that people are opening up there.
Well, perfect. Thank you. Dries, your final view on the topic.
Yeah, I think the good news is I think that I see that a lot of corporates in Germany are realizing that they need to engage in ecosystems to solve some of the challenges that they are facing. So I think that's the good news. I think the bad news is that most of them think that they should be the orchestrator of the ecosystem. I don't know any automotive company in Germany that doesn't want to become the orchestrator of the new Internet of Things ecosystem. And I think maybe you're not the core orchestrator, and that's not a problem. But so I think that sometimes they're a bit too ambitious in that respect, or they do not recognize that they might not be the core actor in the ecosystem. And I think the second thing, I think where we still is a lot of room of improvement is on the people side. That's why in the end, partnerships are done by people. And again, I think if you want to play this different game, this ecosystem game, it also requires a new set of people with a new set of leadership skills that are actually able to play this increasing the size of the pizza game, which is a very different game than trying to screw your suppliers for 30 years. So I think we need different people there with a different skill set. And actually, it's not about selecting the people with the best technical skills, but it's more about selecting people that have the kind of human interpersonal skills to manage this kind of partnerships. So it should not be somebody that knows how an internet of an IoT system works. It's more about somebody that knows how to work with a startup. And I think also there, often large corporates still need to make some changes in terms of human resource management.
Sometimes I actually wish that people knew how their product works, but I think that's another topic.
Well, thank you both of you for your perspectives, and I'm looking forward to the next talk where we can maybe go a little bit deeper into detail of what you just outlined, Dries. What are the capabilities that managers need in order to lead in this world of ecosystems, in this world of making sure that the pizza is bigger next year than it is this year? Thank you, both of you. I enjoyed our conversation very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.